I'm excited that we're having this dialogue for a lot of different reasons. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself and what brings me here, and hopefully that I can add something to the dialogue and discussion today. First of all, a little bit about myself personally and who I am and where I come from. I was born in Monterrey, Nuevo León, Mexico, to two campesinos that lived in Ventura County. My mom and dad picked strawberries and tomatoes in Ventura County in the fields of Oxnard and Camarillo. And I was brought to Ventura County as a very young infant. My personal story, my dad died when I was 9 months old. And I was brought up by my mom, a single parent. Difficult upbringing. So I know what it's like for many of our students that only have one parent. I know what it's like for a lot of our students that live, unfortunately, on welfare and survival day to day based on the county. My mom had to make a decision as a young infant, which many of our parents are making now, whether or not they go back to Mexico or to their country where they're from, or they stay here. And may my mom rest in peace. She decided to stay here. She learned English, pushed me through school. And then when I went off to UC San Diego, she had no clue where I was going. And I remember driving over there and me spending the day there. She didn't know the difference between UC San Diego and Moore Park College or Ventura College or UCLA or Stanford. She had no concept of the differences between UC, CSU, and the community college. I had the opportunity to come to Berkeley where I have my master's and my PhD. And my mom really didn't know much about Berkeley and about what a great school that I think it is. So one of her friends told her, my mom was a Guadalupana and worked at the churches back home. And she said, hey, tu hijo va a Berkeley? Está bien inteligente entonces. If your son goes to Berkeley, he must be real smart. So when I was about 30 years old, my mom finally said, hey, mijo, eres bien inteligente, ¿verdad? That's at Berkeley. So it took her 30 years to figure out how smart her son was. She had no clue about Berkeley, no matter what I told her. To her, there was no difference between Berkeley and the local community college. She had no clue. So one of her friends told her, your son must be pretty smart if he's at Berkeley in graduate school, huh? And it finally clicked. And those are some of the issues that we need to deal with and grapple with our Latino parents, our Chicano parents. And so I'm going to talk about a couple things, cultural capital and social capital. And then I'm going to talk about where we're at right now, presently with our local schools, and where we're at with our higher education in California. And hopefully some of this will make sense with my personal background, what my parents went through, what I went through, and not really having an understanding about the educational system. And we need to understand that most parents right now, particularly Latino, Chicano parents in the four districts that we're working with in the 4 counties, really don't have a clear understanding about the educational system. And we need to decide whose responsibility that is to give that information to those parents. Is it the parents' responsibility to understand the educational system? Is that the decision the school district's going to make? Hey, it's not ours. We don't got to worry about it. They have to get that information. Because our present channels of communication are broken and not working for this community. No matter what we're doing, it's not working. And if you look at some of our failure rates, what we're doing presently is not working. We need to stop, rethink, reorganize, readjust, and come up with a better plan. First one I want to talk about a little bit is about cultural capital. What are we teaching our kids? We're teaching them that they need to know Eurocentric curriculum. That they need to be able to regurgitate what we were taught 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, for some of you 50 years ago, 60 years ago, and K through 12. Nothing has changed. Maybe now we have one paragraph on Cesar Chavez. And there's probably a paragraph on Cinco de Mayo which is completely irrelevant except Anheuser-Busch and Coors. But we really probably don't have anything about September 16th and El Día de Independencia. So we really need to think in K through 12 whether our present curriculum is really helping our students. Can we find a way to engage them by changing what we teach them? Or are we going to continue to teach them the same thing that we've taught them for decades? Look at the percentages of kids that we have in our school. Look at the percentage of Chicano Latino kids. 40%, 50%, 60%. Some schools 70%, 80%, 90% Latino kids. What percentage of our curriculum is about Chicanos and Latino kids? 1%? How is that balanced? And if we know that if we're reading about ourselves, we're more likely to get excited about ourselves, gives us a certain pride in who we are, the better we're going to do. And I had the discussion last week with our General Education Committee at Los Medanos College, that the first Chicano Studies class that I took as a freshman at UC San Diego opened up my eyes to who I really was. And I took it with a professor, his name was Ricardo Romo, who became my role model. Ricardo is now the president of the University of Texas at San Antonio. But why should a child have to wait till he's 18 or 19 years old to read about themselves? Why can't we incorporate that in high school? Why can't we have the Chicano studies, multicultural studies, African American studies, gender studies, women's studies within what we offer at the school site? Do we continue to do what we're doing now? It's not going to work. And our children will continue to fail. A really important piece to think about critically is our course offerings. What are schools doing to balance the playing field? If we give a kid a book about Chicano studies, we let them read Burro Genius, The Rain of Gold, a variety of great books that we can use as part of our core English instruction, just to focus on English for a minute. I think that you will see that the success rate of Chicano Latino kids will transform itself overnight, just directly by changing the context of what we read. But who's willing to do that within the context of this county? That's an important decision that we need to make as the demographics of our K through 12, and particularly in high school, continue to change. The second thing I want to talk about is social capital. Social capital is basically having a social network or an understanding of a system, having information to navigate through something. Most of our Latino Chicano students and their parents do not have the proper information to navigate from high school to higher education. They don't. My parents didn't. They didn't know the difference between UC, CSU, community college. Zero. Had no clue. Now we need to understand that most of our Chicano Latino parents do not have that information. They don't know. We can go to any of our high schools and do a survey of all the Chicano kids and their parents. And you know what we're going to find? First of all, we're going to find that the Chicano Latino parents, when we compare them against other ethnic groups, will have the highest rating of supporting their kids of going to college. That's their dream, more than any other ethnic groups. Chicano Latino parents, on a survey, will by far surpass how much they want their children to go to college. It'll be in the 90th percentile across the board. Everybody else will probably be in the 80th percentile, doing some of the research. So we know we have a captive audience of parents that really want to push their kids towards higher education. Now we're going to ask them, do you know what it takes to go into higher education? And they're going to rank the lowest. We're lucky if 1 out of every 5 knows what they need to get into college. And then if we add that, it makes it a little bit more complicated, that many of our parents are from Mexico. Many of them are from Mexico. Their frame of reference is an educational system based in Mexico, where the teacher and the educational system are put on a pedestal, where they never question a teacher. If a teacher says, le vamos a meter un pedazo que no hace atención, le voy a pegar, pégale, no tenga miedo. Unfortunately, that's what I just said. In Mexico, if a teacher tells a parent, I'm going to smack your kid because he's messing around in class. Smack him, straighten him out. There's this blind allegiance to teachers in education. There's doctors, lawyers, and teachers in Mexico. They're very highly thought of. Unfortunately, and I'm not bashing our teachers here, and I'm not bashing our system, but parents come with that kind of same perspective that what our educational system puts you or tells you is what you need to do. Don't question it. Don't question it. A couple decades ago, we did a research project out of Berkeley High School, and we found that 32% of the young Chicano kids, Latino kids, coming from our local feeder schools were being put right back into the same math class that they already completed an A or B with at the middle school. They weren't being allowed to move into geometry. There's a lot of issues that were going on in Berkeley at that time. But the Mexican kids were not being allowed to take geometry as ninth graders. That was just an unwritten rule. And I met with the math department, and one of them said, black and Mexican kids don't have the cognitive ability to do geometry as ninth graders. Don't have the cognitive ability to do it. 20 years ago seems like forever, but for me it was yesterday. parents that their kids took algebra in 8th grade and got an A or a B, Berkeley High said, no, you're going to take algebra again in 9th grade, didn't even question it. They had a blind allegiance to the school and thought the school was doing the right thing. That is a dilemma that we need to work with. That is a problem that we have. How are we going to educate the parents to begin to question some of the things? What are school districts doing to provide parents that have proper information about the A through G requirements? And understanding that if your son is not, or your daughter is not in the appropriate classes to begin with, they're not going to go to the University of California or the California state system. Parental involvement is key. That's the next thing we really need to think about. How do we involve parents in a genuine way? And it's not just inviting them to a parent. What do we do for our freshman orientations? At most schools. Of course, not the ones in this county. But at most schools, an orientation is focused on 2 things. Here's your class schedule. Here's a map of school. Good luck. Have fun. We'll see you at graduation. The 50% of you that are left. That's it. There's no real dialogue with students and parents as they transition in 9th grade. We really need to think about that. Why? 42% of our kids fail algebra in 9th grade. About 44% fail algebra. If you fail 9th grade algebra, you're going to have a very difficult transition into 10th grade. You're going to be taking 9th grade classes all over again. You most likely will flunk out. That's why folks drop. That's why 9th, 10th grade is our biggest dropout year. If you fail English and you got to go back and take English with 9th graders again, or go take it somewhere in the summer that we're not even going to offer that opportunity anymore. 9th grade is a critical piece. We can't intervene in sophomores. The state gives us money for sophomore counseling. It's too late. Who's left when they're juniors? Very few. And if you look at some of our dropout rates and failure rates that we have a serious problem. But we need to address it in 9th grade. We need to address it in 9th grade.